Hey everyone, welcome to Source, the Rethink Mining podcast. We're going to explore mining, its innovation, and transformation in the industry that's going to drive our world forward. I'm Carl, I'm your host, and the Executive Director and CEO of Rethink Mining. What we're going to do with this podcast is meet some really interesting people, talk about the industry, talk about innovations, talk about new technology, and explore what's actually possible and what we can do collectively to create the minerals and metals that are necessary to drive our world forward. I hope you join us. We're really fortunate today to have George Hemingway with us. George is a managing partner with Stratalis on the innovation practice. And it's going to be an awesome conversation because George and I think and talk a lot alike about similar things. So George, welcome. Thank you for your time.
Thank you for having me.
Really looking forward to this. To get started, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself and kind of how you got into mining? Because you're not really from mining.
No, I'm not really from mining, although the last 11 years I have been deeply entrenched in the mining industry. So, well, let's start with this. I'm the managing partner of Stratalis. And Stratalis is a boutique management consultancy. Boutique means we're specialized. And we're focused almost exclusively on the future, helping heads of state, heads of organizations, heads of companies, including most of the major mining companies, to think about the future and what it means for their businesses and how to deal with uncertainty. And it's interesting because, of course, the future is a very uncertain place, but most people don't think about how to deal with the uncertainty of that. But what we help companies do is we help them to become much more future-focused, to understand how their operations, how their portfolios, how their people have to change in order to succeed in super uncertain times. I did not come from the mining industry. In fact, as I might have mentioned to you in the past, I've been an advisor, a management consultant for 25 years. And I started in things like MasterCard and Pepsi and, working for global industrials, GE, stuff like that. And Stratalis focuses on industrials and on miners, right? But even before then, I ended up in consulting, as one does, because I didn't know what I wanted to do. And so I before I was in consultant, I ran Pizza Hut and KFC for Central Europe. I worked for a big company. Even before that, I was in the theater for a bit on Broadway, and I started a business and I sold it, and then decided that, well, heck, I don't know what to do next. So I did what anyone else in my shoes would do. I decided to learn on someone else's dime. And that, ladies and gentlemen, is management consulting. And at some point, you learn enough that maybe you can give a little bit back. And so what we do, again, to the point, we help CEOs, we help CTOs to set their vision of the future, to build the technology roadmaps to get there, to think about what that means in terms of their portfolios, and really to sort of explore the unexplored.
Yeah.
And then really bring it back down to what is the mine of the future and how the heck do we make money from it and how do we get there?
And on that, your background from Broadway and running KFC and the pizza for Central Europe, has that experience influenced what you're doing in mining? And even the experience you had in like MasterCard and doing other, that has influenced the direction and what you're doing now?
I would say tremendously so. In fact, it's probably what makes, I think, Stratalis, the people we hire and the work we do, different from other companies, right? Because generally speaking, right, you try and hire people traditionally hire people that are specialized. Well, this person's been in mining for 30 years. And the problem with specialization, right, is that what you get is you get an expertise on the known.
Yeah.
Right? If all you want to do is you want to be just as good as the best other person in your industry, right? That's the best you're going to get, the benchmark, right? So your valet, you want to be as good as Rio Tinto. If that's all you want to be, then you go ahead, you hire the other guy, and then they'll get you to normal. But if you want to think like, what is GE or the U.S. Army or the DOD or Tesla or Apple or heck, even like a butter manufacturer doing? And what are they doing, and how can I bring that kind of optimization or that use of data or thinking about people differently? You've got to bring something from the outside in. Yep. And so, one of the fascinating things I did, it's over 10 years ago, it might have been 15, is we had done this thing called strategic scenarios. You think about the future with the executive leadership team of one of the world's largest chemicals companies, top 3. and we start talking about the rise of China and trade barriers and debt and populism, and we end up predicting things like Trump and all that other jazz. And when I came to the mining, and made a huge difference to them, when I came to the mining industry, you tried to bring that thinking to the table, and you realize that, yeah, some people get it, most people don't. How do we shift that? And so bringing that thinking in was really the fun bit.
Well, it's really funny too. I didn't realize this, but I started in Rethink Mining, aka CMIC, 11 years ago. Actually, 11 years ago yesterday.
That's great.
Which is shocking. And my other claim to fame that I used to make was not coming from mining.
Yeah.
So
Can you still say it?
Exactly.
It's interesting because I tell people, right? I tell people, and especially friends of mine, I'm like, well, I'm not from the mining industry, and they're like, look, at this point, you're doing the keynotes to open mining stuff. You're doing the mining conferences. You advise the mining. Are you sure?
Yeah.
I'm like, oh, I guess I am.
Well,
sorry, go ahead, Carl. Yeah.
No, I agree. That's why I was saying it's hard to say that now because it's been 11 years, but also the diversity of thought. You come in with different ideas from different industries. And then once you understand the industry a bit better, you can actually start to make that change. But it's not an easy road.
That's right.
So the interesting thing, George, I like what you said, like the future of mining, because we hear this a lot, right? The mine of the future. If I hear that again, the mine of the future, what is the mine of the future? We're going to create the mine of the... I've been hearing that for 11 years, right? The mine of the future. But it's not really what you do future forecasting, what it could be and where it could be, but also how you get there.
Yeah, that's right.
So if you could run us through where the mining industry is today, like roughly where it is.
Yeah.
Where does it need to be? And there's a difference between need and want, right?
Sure.
Where we think, you and I think it needs to be, but where they want to be.
Yeah.
How do we get there, right? It's kind of... Some of your future forecasting, you wrote about this in the articles about 9 years ago.
Yeah, that's right. So I think it's a fun question. It's a tough question. I think it's the right question. So thank you for asking. I mean, first of all, I think the industry is actually doing remarkably okay today. Yeah. From a linear point of view, and you're looking at me like, despite despite what we might expect. I mean, first of all. Gold is doing fine. Nickel, lithium, rare earths. Oh, everyone's excited. Battery metals, iron ore is still doing okay. Heck, even coal is doing all right, right? Despite all the forecasts. But I think when you ask the question, how is the mining industry doing? I think one of the first things that we have to recognize is that there really isn't one mining industry. We have to recognize our own mental model and our own bias around this. You and I were sitting here in Toronto, with a North American view of what mining is with North American problems. It's kind of like asking, how is the agricultural industry doing?
Yeah.
I mean, that question is different in Germany than it is in Somalia.
Absolutely.
And different in Australia, right? But having said that, I think there are some macro things that we can bear in mind. I think from the industry's point of view, how it's doing, two things keep me up at night. The first thing that keeps me up at night is the thing that always keeps me up at night. It's people and how to make the industry bipolar. So, so the first thing with people, right? I think that the mining industry, miners, and the people that are in the industry don't do a very good job of convincing the world and explaining to the world why we matter. Of sharing our purpose, of understanding, how mining adds to the world. Now, a lot of people say this. The real challenge, however, is that because we're not aggressive enough, and I'm going to use that word aggressive.
Absolutely.
Okay, because I don't think it's a word that necessarily was used in the past, right? And we'll get to that. I think we're at huge risk of people coming in and continuing to disrupt the industry.
Absolutely.
We'll talk about that. It's, so we're kind of like a little ship on somebody else's wave. And where we go, we go. I think being bipolar, the interesting thing, right, is that the future isn't just technology. And I know you and I have a bias to talk about technology a lot, right? But if you're a futurist, which I guess I am, being a futurist is recognizing that, in fact, the greatest uncertainties, generally speaking, are social, they're political, they're regulatory, they're not technological. And they're also some of the greatest shifts of change in an industry itself. And so I think that, I'm going to sound actually like a traditionalist for a minute. I think the industry is actually, from a challenge point of view, is doing okay. It has its eye on the ball. If that ball is battery metals, and if that ball is AI, and if that ball is decarbonization, and even if that ball is talent, But with the exception of talent, right, which I think is one of those things that keeps me up at night, because a lot of people don't mind working in mining, but don't want to work for miners.
Yeah.
Right.
Exactly.
I don't have a talent problem.
Yeah.
I hire a lot of people with mining engineering degrees and MBAs. I got people from mining companies calling me up and asking me for a job. And we do a lot of work in mining. I don't have a problem with attracting to the mining industry. Miners might have a problem, but let's talk about that for a second, right? I think one of the biggest challenges facing the industry is that they have their eye on one set of goalposts, the one I mentioned, but they're ignoring another. And so I think the challenge is that the industry needs to focus on building a more flexible operating model. It needs to build a set of operations that are as flexible as the future is uncertain, because the future itself is very, very hard to predict. So I got some thoughts around that, but I don't want to.
No, keep going. Keep going.
I think, look, I think the answer for me, at least from a challenge point of view, is that the industry needs to, and it's doing a lot of this, it needs to merge.
Yeah.
So that's happening. It needs to lean down. It needs to get operationally sharp, and then it needs to remove and reduce its dependency on the greatest source of uncertainty in the world, the one that has always been the greatest source of uncertainty in the world, the one that will remain the greatest source of uncertainty in the world, which is people within its operating theater.
Yeah.
And that may be not a popular thing to say, and thankfully I'm not a mining company CEO, but it's the truth. We need to move to a safe, efficient factory mine. Something that is predictable, something that's continuous, and something that doesn't have people in unsafe places. And that's the first thing we need to do. The second thing that the mining companies need to do is, despite this passion for specialization, right? Which now, right? Oh, we're a battery metals company. We're getting rid of our coal. It's okay, because there's a reason for that. It's multiples. It's multiples. You want to raise money. There's a very short window of time that they have to become, merge and become the nickel leader and the copper leader. But because of it, we're now kind of concentrating our risk into very specific areas.
Yes. Yeah.
And so when we build technology roadmaps for miners, we look at the future. That's important. You also have to look at creating an operation that is lean, that is efficient, that deals with the issues today. And believe it or not, and this is where I said I think I'm sounding like a traditionalist, I think people have lost their focus. Dare I say it, on the basics. Which is a very non-futurist thing to say. And they have concentrated so much on one set of goalposts that they're missing a little bit there. So we are, like you and I did and do, as well we all do, this is human, we are being stuck in our own mental model.
Yes.
We're taking a very linear view. A greatest example of this right now, I think, is like something like batteries and battery metals. So battery metals is the future, right? Nickel, lithium, if you're a government, rare earths, right? We have a critical mineral strategy. Like I said, it's a good time to split your portfolio up, get your multiples, and so become all those things. But let me paint a little picture for you, okay? So imagine for a second that the media starts to publicize that EVs are really bad for the environment. They're worse than gasoline-powered cars, okay? And they do that because, they emit a lot of stuff, and lithium isn't safe, and lithium mining isn't great, and it's still powered by coal, and they do catch on fire. They do. They catch on fire.
They do.
Right?
Yeah,
Okay,
absolutely.
right. And then at the same time, environmentalists say, okay, well, we won't have this, so we're going to take down some battery factories. We're going to take down Tesla things. We're going to stop this happening today. And it happens, right? And hackers bring them down. And at the same time, we look at the world that we're in, and this massive, massive global debt that we've picked up has finally caught up with us, even in the United States, where we seem to be immune to all of this stuff. Finally, it catches up with us. The economy tanks. People are challenged. We switch back to that national populism sort of thing that was the last few years, right? And it's not helped by the fact that Donny Boy, right, may be reelected president in 2024, and that means he's going to protect traditional industries. That's going to slow down the whole electric push tremendously.
Absolutely.
Because where the U.S. goes, many other people follow. It's going to protect traditional industries one more time. So welcome back coal, welcome back gasoline, so forth and so on. And at the same time, the good news is that apart from lithium batteries, we now have batteries made of sodium. We have batteries made of fuel cells. We have batteries made of ham sandwiches. And they don't suck, right? And so it doesn't matter. You take all that, goodbye lithium, right? Or goodbye nickel. Now, the funny bit of that is that none of that is novel, right? This week, an article in the New York Times and the Daily Mail is talking about how EVs are worse than gasoline. This morning, hackers and environmentalists took down the Tesla factories, right? So they're gone. If the election was held today, Donald Trump would win.
Yeah, that's right.
Okay. And there are plenty of battery chemistries out there.
Yeah, there's tons of
and
it's been going on for years. Yeah.
Right. So, I mean, I guess the whole point is that if that happens and the rules of the game change and you're a big mining company, what do you have to rely on? You better have a flexible portfolio that makes money because you're a business.
Yeah.
You better be able to be as flexible as the future is uncertain. And you better reduce your greatest dependency on your greatest source of uncertainty, which is things like safety and risks. Yeah. You don't want tailings dams falling. You don't want people getting hurt when slopes collapse. You got to get the basics right. And apologies for the diatribe, but that I think is kind of the first setup that the future isn't just tech. You've got to recognize you're going to get it wrong. So are you flexible?
Yeah, and there's a couple of key things you said. I just wanted to. You talked about we're ripe for disruption from other industries, and what I see is the downstream buyers of minerals and metals are actually getting much closer.
Oh yeah,
much, and it happened really fast. Like Apple in 2016 or whatever, sustainability report, no more mining, and now they're talking to mining companies.
Right. I remember they created their own form of aluminum, right? Just a bit in there, right? And now Rio's in there with them, right? That's
exactly. And other companies are investing from the
Tesla,
like it's coming.
Ones,
It's happening. Like it is happening, and it's happening fast.
Yeah.
But as you said, George, I'm agree with this 1,000%. We're not aggressive enough. Like miners talk to mining, with mining, for mining, about mining.
Yeah, it's an echo chamber. Like many industries, most industries are an echo chamber.
Yes and no. I've been involved in lots of other industries, and I see them at other events.
Well,
right?
and communicating better, but
communicating better and more commodity based. So I agree with that 100%. And it's funny. A couple of years ago, I did a keynote. 2018, did a keynote, and compared, for example, looking at different business models. Right. Yeah. Compared, for example. Android, right? Mm-hmm. And the phone companies, 86% or whatever the number is, 70% of phones produced, the manufacturers do not own the software that runs the phone. Use that as the analogy, right? Yeah. And then the next slide said, have you heard of this new mining company that owns no asset or just owns assets or blah, blah, blah.
Yeah, that's right.
The room was dead silent. Yeah. They thought it was real. Like it is a real possibility that this is probably happening right now.
Well, it is a real possibility, right? And I don't remember. I remember. Well, I'm trying to recall who it was. It might have been Glencore, or Strata, or something like that a few years ago, right? Started doing some things, and I talked about it, I think, as well, right? Could you have a mining company that owns no mines?
Yep.
Right, and why not? Right, that was the whole concept of Uber, right? It's a company that owns no cars and so forth and so on. And hotel company owns hotels, Airbnb, blah blah blah. And that kind of gets to the interesting question of, fundamentally, what is your core capability? What is the value you bring to the table in a world, and take it a step further from a technological point of view, right? In a world in which everything is automated and everything is mechanized and everything is predictable and everything is all that jazz, which we're not at yet.
Yeah.
What's the value a mining company brings to the table? Is it the discovery of the assets? Is it the connecting to the end market with a specialty product? Is it the actual operation itself? It doesn't have to be all three.
Yeah,
the oil and gas companies learned that. Yeah. Pepsi learned it, right? Yeah. And Coke, they split off their bottling operations.
That's right.
And they're just a marketing machine.
Yep.
Right? So, but we still do everything.
Yeah.
We still do absolutely everything, and we try to be good at absolutely everything.
And more than what is in our core competencies.
And more than what is in our core competencies. But there's been no choice. Yeah. Really, right? I mean, there hasn't been I'm just going to outsource my exploration, or I'm going to outsource my geotechnical slope stability, or I'm going to outsource my processing. Because there's been a little bit of that, but because there's been a need or a desire, especially for the big miners, to own everything left to right.
Yeah. But is that fair to say, though, that they do everything? Because if you take a look at the analogy I use is like in software, for example, you have the startups and then the big companies, the IBMs, Microsofts, they acquire them. Same thing in mining companies don't invest a lot in exploration. They're waiting for the juniors and then they buy it, right?
Yeah, no,
So
you're
they've
right.
kind of outsourced some of that, kind of outsourced some of that.
Fair enough, yeah.
But it actually begs the question, what is a mining company? And looking into the future, what is a mining company? Because there's mining companies now, as you say, they do everything, right?
Yeah.
But there's also mining companies that are developing technologies that they're now licensing, creating startups and trying to push it out. Is that a diversification strategy, or is that getting way away from the core business and competency of a mining company? Again, there's different opinions on this.
This is a rough one.
Yeah.
I think the jury is definitely out on this one. Yeah. I mean, without naming names, right? You and I have seen, and at this point, my eye is really on the top 5 or 6 diversified mining companies, right? So, and a couple of Canadian-based as well, right? You've seen mining companies take really, really deep investment into developing digital products.
Yes.
And they did it for their own reasons, and it worked out for them. And now they're trying to resell them to the market.
Yeah.
And, it takes time.
Yeah.
It's a certain competency. You've seen, and I'll say it, the BHPs, the Rios, the Vales of the world, hit the Fortescues, whatever it might be, invest in technologies, invest in ventures and do venture funds, and try to diversify their portfolio without any success yet.
Yeah.
I mean, without any real demonstrable success.
Exactly.
Okay, there's little things. And so, I mean, if you want to go deep into diversifying your portfolio as a company, you can. But then you better start creating like an X-wing.
Yeah, exactly.
Like a Boeing X, an Embraer X, a something X, and treating it differently from the rest of the company and investing in it differently than the rest of the company.
And with the right skill set that knows how to do this.
It's a different game altogether. Otherwise, hopefully you're doing it because you want to spur technologies that are going to help you to transform.
Yeah.
But, for me, if you're investing in synthetic biology, it's because you think that may be the future of improving your recoveries or something like that, right? Or stabilizing your tailings or cleaning your water. It's not because you decided that you're going to become a pharmaceutical company one day you have an expertise in synthetic biology.
Yeah.
And I think that line's a little fuzzy.
Agreed.
But hey, companies change all the time. I remember years ago for one of the Australian fellas, we were looking at repurposing. We did a kind of future of closure and closed sites and all that other stuff. And we're like, well, how about solar panels, right? Why don't we generate energy on these things? And it came back from the executive at the time that no, we're a mining company. We're not an energy company.
Yeah.
That's not what we do. And of course now, they're all over their sites.
Yeah.
Right? People's perspectives pivots.
Exactly.
Pivot all the time.
Well, and that's what you said too about flexibility, right? Flexibility is I'm not going to say operating like a startup where you have to pivot, but the company has to have the flexibility so they can pivot when external factors drive them. Because typically, a mining company in general is like it's like a large ship. It takes a long time to turn the corner.
Well, today it does.
Yeah,
That's
today
right.
it does,
Exactly right. I mean, but hey, I just finished a really interesting project for a smaller company. Yeah. So you may or may not have heard of them, but they're number one in their particular country in this particular commodity. And the CTO approached us, having heard of us, out of the blue, and said, "Hey, listen, I would like for the board, I would like an understanding of what is our vision of the future? How will technology craft our bring our strategy to life?" And what was the strategy? The strategy was that we are 100% this commodity today, and by 2030 we want to be 50% an energy company.
Oh wow, cool.
And I said, okay, well that sounds nice. I mean, having set my fair share of strategies myself, and then I looked, and they're doing it.
Yeah.
They're really like genuinely like doing it. Now, part of the reason they're doing it is because they have a lot of energy insecurity in the area that they're in. But they're investing in new forms of energy. They're investing in new kinds of plants. They're investing in solar. And I think right now, and it's only been a couple of years, I think like a really healthy chunk of their EBITDA, like 35% of their EBITDA is coming from something other than the commodity.
Yeah.
So not everybody is necessarily uncommitted to change and able to pivot. These guys are able to pivot.
So on that though, and again back to the whole idea of looking into the future in general, the industry in general, or you said before the top 5, right? The top 5 different whatever.
So
however
most of
you
my
want
clients
to look
tend to be the top. Top 5 people.
do we do a good job of looking at, like you just, that example you gave is beautiful. I love that example because you don't really see it. Because right now the future is net zero by 2030.
Yeah.
And that's a really, really narrow way to look at the future of a company. And you're going to make a lot of mistakes and miss a lot of opportunities.
And
so
more than that, you may not get it, but we'll talk about that later.
Likely not going to get it.
Depends on the company. Depends where your energy comes from. Yeah, but anyway,
90% aren't going to get there. But do we do a good job at actually looking into the future, like you said, 2030, 2035, and actually having strategies in place to get there? Or are we so embedded in as I like to say, the tyranny of short-termism? What's a quarterly report? What's a quarterly financials? Have you seen companies like the one you just gave that actually do that, look into the future and do it, or as an industry in general?
I mean, it's so the short answer is I think we are less short-termist. As I was talking at the beginning, we're less short-termist now as an industry than we were.
Yes, and I would agree with that.
And I do believe the tyranny of short-termism is a thing for any company, in particular mining companies. I mean, you and I both know that when it comes to especially innovation and technology investment and open innovation and venture investments and the sort of thing that CIMIC does, for example, right? The investment is heavy and then the investment is gone. The strategy changes and you're like, well, crap, had you just continued on, we would be finished by the time you decide to reinvest. And that's a reality, and you've lived with it, for a decade. Having said that, I think, as I was saying, there is a view on that future, 2030, AI, battery metals. That means that people aren't necessarily being as short-termist as they need to be on some of the basic things. And maybe that's not the same thing. Maybe focusing on the basics isn't the same. I don't think mining companies are good at it. I remember years ago, some companies spent time on it. I remember reading a set of strategic scenarios that Anglo American did, for example. This was a while ago. And you know what? The really futuristic stuff. So someone must have done it at the executive level. It was pretty good. I remember Vale went ahead and did some strategic scenarios. It was pretty good. BHP certainly has. They actually built a lot of their environmental futures thinking based on scenarios and looking out there. But then the question really becomes, so now once that exercise is done, what?
How do
does
we get
anyone
it?
pay any attention to it? Does it? I think that's where the struggle happens. But it happens in all industries. It's not just mining.
Agreed.
It's just maybe a little bit more sucked into the weeds of a daily operation here than some others.
Exactly. And it's funny you gave the example. I remember listening to a keynote from the former, I don't know what his title was, at Anglo American, talking about nanobots. For ore extractions. Like, wow, somebody's actually thinking of this. This is amazing.
No, we talked about it. Yeah, go ahead. Yeah,
no,
please,
but it was amazing to hear that because it's technologies and things like this the entire industry could use, right?
Yeah, no, for sure. I mean, so and maybe we'll bring it up later, right? And back in 2014, 10 years ago. And I actually brought a copy because I haven't read it in a decade. We were talking about synthetic biology for mining and nanobots for mining. And some of those things have come to pass and some of those things haven't. So it's not like the path isn't going forward. I think one of the biggest challenges is that this is interesting. We tend to lose our focus. Because we get burned out as executives. And management consultants, not so much, because management consultants try to sell you on a promise of the future. And for the most part, many of the larger ones sell you just a little bit earlier than you're actually ready for it, which allows them to learn, but doesn't necessarily allow them to help you change. And I think at Stratalis, we avoid that because we recognize it. But it is a truth within the industry. And that's because we as human beings always underestimate the amount of time it takes for a technology to come to fruition,
Oh yeah.
or we overestimate, I guess I'll kind of explain it, and we underestimate how quickly it will be adopted once it does.
Yeah.
And that's why we were talking about electric cars in the 50s.
Yeah. Yeah. It's not new.
It's not new, but it's not till now, this century, that they become a thing, and boom, adopted very quickly.
Takes off. Yeah.
And that's why we've been talking about mechanization and automation for decades, but it takes longer time for the technology to come to fruition. But when it comes, boom. And that's why we talk about all these decarb technologies.
Yeah.
And we say, by 2030, we'll get them done. But I don't think we will. We'll see in 2031, you and I will have a conversation. But once they happen, boom, we'll adopt them
Really quickly. Yeah. But
Really quickly,
actually on that though, is the reason for the push on decarbonization, is that internal, or is that being forced because of external governments are saying thou shalt reduce emissions by this much? Or is it a bit of both?
Now it's a little bit of both, right? Yeah. So now people have, and having built and even set, some of those original targets that got around, right? But having built so many of the decarbonization roadmaps for the majors and help them sort of manage them still. We just came off one of the uncertainty management projects that we have to understand if we could reach the target. You now recognize that in a very positive way, both culturally because of the people that work in these companies and they believe in it. Like, you put my daughter in a mining company, and she will absolutely not just say this is my job, but this is my passion. Yeah. The world needs this, and I'm going to make it happen. Yeah. And because I think many of the CEOs that have been brought in now recognize that the boards and their investors want it, I don't think this is just external pressure anymore. Now we have truly put ourselves, embraced it. Having said that, that's not how it started, right?
Yeah, no, absolutely.
Any more than, and that's because investors and the Church of England and the UN and all those others said this mattered, the Paris Agreement. And so people are now really, putting their back into it. Most of them.
Yes.
Exactly. Some are not, because they have made the judgment call that no one is going to penalize them for it. Yep. And I also see, and I brought this up now a couple of times, that when it comes to 2030, I think you see some miners starting to back off those 2030 targets, not because they don't want to make it happen. Genuinely, they want to make them happen, make it happen. It's because the tech isn't there yet.
Agreed.
You want an ammonia-powered locomotive? Yeah. Guess what?
It doesn't exist.
It ain't 2030. Yeah. You want a 300-ton, ethanol-powered haul truck?
Doesn't exist yet.
It's not quite there. Well, there are RPM problems, there are horsepower problems, there's all sorts of problems.
And some of the more avant-garde companies are asking the question, should we basically, the way I like to put it, for example, surface haulage, you're just swapping out the energy platform. That's all you're doing, right? You've still got the 400 or 300-ton haul truck, swapping out the energy platform and nothing else. Is that the right solution? The answer is probably not really. There's others out there that give you more benefits. Yeah. But it's going to take longer to get to where it needs to be, where it can be adopted.
And it's going to require us to do the tough part, which is kind of actually rethink how we operate.
Exactly.
Right? And so that's why you see, things like the Scania and the Volvo small truck solutions, but they're focused on open pit and quarrying.
Yes. Yeah.
It's a bigger market, right? Yeah. So now, are you now willing to go ahead and move to a 75-ton? There's a Chinese version as well. I don't remember the company that makes it. And Anglo's working on one as well. They're all over the place, right? So are you willing to move to a 75-ton, or even lower, small electric truck or small something truck? That's not as simple as just switching it over, especially because you now need 4 people. Yeah. Because now we need automation and some sort of swarmy type of fleet management thing, right? To think it through. And we need a number of different things to make that possible. Great opportunity, right? Now we can sort the ore, we can do all sorts of different stuff. But it's a different business. It's a different.
Well, and that comes down to what you were saying before about the future of a company. Yeah. What does the future look like? Right. What does the business look like? The business model look like? So
who should be running that thing?
Absolutely.
Who should be spending the money on the tech? Should you be outsourcing it to, I don't know who does these things, and outsource contractors and Kiewitz
EPCMs
or something like that. Yeah, that does this sort of thing. Should you really be mining your own mines? Are you any good at it?
Yeah.
Are you any good at it? I mean, you take you take the challenges of mining in Sudbury even.
Yeah.
Right. It's right in the backyard, right over here, right? And anyone that works in mining in Canada understands the challenges of mining in Sudbury, understands that there is a definite difference between how one mining company does in terms of success and performance and another mining company does. So what do you bring to the table?
Yeah.
Are you bringing to the table the fact that you have a lot of cash and you have a huge, fantastic ability to plan and you've got great governmental relations and you can, or are you bringing to the table the fact that you are the world's most efficient miner?
Yeah.
If the answer is the second one, maybe you let someone else mine them for you.
Yep.
It's not. I mean, I think that's kind of what you're getting at.
The business model. Do we outsource? Do we do things differently?
Yeah.
Excuse me.
So there we go, Carl. Let's find a couple $100 billion.
Yeah.
Okay. And let's just take all the mines and we let the BHPs and the Valets do their bit. They'll buy up exploration companies.
Yeah.
Right, and they'll deal with the marketing. They'll figure out how to go downstream.
Yeah.
Because they're trying to.
Yep.
Right? I mean,
Absolutely.
the Valley, for example, is doing very interesting work, and they're not the only ones, but they always have with their iron ore stuff, right? And the very specific pellets but even base metals, folks.
Absolutely.
Very interesting work on downstream specialty projects and being more integrated. Nucor, Rio, doing all that type of thing as well with trying to work downstream with automotive companies and the battery company, right? And we'll just run the mines.
Yeah.
And, we'll just get them lean and do machines and make a nice little margin. What do you see? Got a couple $100 billion lying around?
The interesting thing, one of the conversations we've had over the last couple of months, it actually started 10 years ago.
Yeah.
Everything's got a 10-year history, unfortunately. 10 years ago, and the idea, and something that was borrowed from the aluminum industry, where a number of companies got together and basically said, we're going to jointly operate this facility.
Yeah.
The analogy we use with mining, and this conversation came up actually just a month ago.
Yeah.
Companies asked, how can you do this?
Right.
This is great. It's been 10 years. Actually get an asset jointly owned by the handful of mining companies that have the same philosophical bent on what the future looks like.
Yeah.
And it's not just decarbonization, it's more than that, right? And they understand the future. Have the ability to weather storms financially when markets going up and down, and you can actually get through things and make those consistent investments versus, as you said a minute ago, dropping off and coming back and dropping off.
Yeah.
And then use that asset as an operating mine to actually build, test, and make it a future, whatever the future mine looks like. Say there's an open pit. You're not using haul trucks. You're doing different things.
Yeah.
You're not processing. You're not bringing all your waste to surface. You're bringing 10% of it, right? You're doing all of these things people are thinking about, but nobody wants to take the risk themselves.
Right.
But could you actually do something like that? A single asset, jointly owned, and basically focused on the future while being profitable at the same time.
Yeah, well, that's a tricky bit. But I think it's a great idea, and I mean, and again, you see pockets of that.
Yeah, exactly.
Right. I mean, for example, you guys represent a bit of a pocket of that sort of thing, and so do all the ventures, right?
Yeah.
Things, whether they live or die, like Charge On and stuff like that, where the mining companies come together. But I don't think you've ever. I don't know, you tell me. I don't think you've ever seen a mining company come together to run a profitable, modern test bed mine. I can't think of.
It hasn't happened.
I can't think of one.
Yeah, as far as we know, it hasn't happened. Again, it's been a conversation.
It's interesting. I can't actually. I'm trying, but for the life of me, I can't think of another industry. And throw me a bone here if you can. I can't think of another industry.
Telecom have actually come together to build network test beds.
Okay. Yeah.
With fiber optics and the fast switching and all this sort of stuff. So there's a few of them that have been out there.
Yeah, I mean, what you do see more of. So that's great. Thanks for that. I'm gonna store that in the back pocket for one day, right? One of the things you do see more of, right, is you do see deeper integration.
Yeah.
With like suppliers, right? So like you look at BASF, for example, right? And their Verbund concept, right? Where all of them and their suppliers and everything are concentrated both physically and also from a collaboration point of view to like co-develop and do things like that. You definitely see it with the DoD.
Yeah. Oh,
Right? And you work with
absolutely.
things with the Department of Defense, and had some fun work over there. Right? Is that you definitely see that is a close alliance.
Yeah.
Right, between the fleet, the Navy, for example, and the suppliers and others to create single solutions. You see it at NASA, right? So, but you don't see that integration. You see it on a light level, right? I mean, I'd call those partnerships, right? You look at Newmont and Caterpillar, for example.
Exactly.
Right, but is that really coming together as a suite to? I mean, it is in a way. No, but it's not the same kind of thing we're talking about.
It's not the next level.
Yeah, exactly.
And the other challenge too, the other piece of that too, is like Newmont and Cat did their deal, and then Tech and Cat did their deal. Right. It's probably the same thing because for roughly the same. Like you two could have gone together with a bit of power.
Yeah. You could have
to actually get more purchasing
and
power.
they don't even compete, do they?
No.
Right, yeah, but
well, you can say mining companies don't compete except on
they compete
assets
for people.
and people.
Well, yeah, that's right. I mean, we compete for people.
Yeah.
Right? Assets, but there's enough difference between those two.
Absolutely.
Right? From an asset point of view, that and geographical point of view, that you could make that argument, but we all compete for people.
Well, absolutely, yeah. And that comes down to something. Again, we're kind of circling back to a couple of things here. You mentioned this before: huge labor shortage. Right. There's a huge and you talked about your daughter. She went into mining, be totally passionate. But is there it's coming back to the tyranny of short-termism. Is the shortage because we're looking at the industry today versus what it's going to be like in 5 years or not even 5 years? Yeah, within 5 years.
Yeah, so yes, I think yes. But so I've thought about this one a lot because we're now doing a lot of work.
Yeah.
In fact, just started a project this week for one of the big miners, thinking about what are the capabilities of the future.
There you go.
Okay, so what are the capabilities of the future? And the reason why they asked us to do this is because they recognize that there is a shortage today.
Yeah.
There will be a shortage in the future, but even more importantly, if you don't think about what the capabilities are you need for the future, you're going to miss the boat on it entirely, whether or not there are enough people or not.
Yeah.
Okay. So I think to your point, yes, I agree with you. One of the challenges is we're not thinking enough about the industry in the future to think about capabilities. But there's no question about it. If you are in the geotechnical field, right? Because we did a lot of the technology roadmaps for tailings, seismicity and slope stability, right? That kind of thing. There's a definite shortage of qualified, available, good geotechnical talent.
Yeah.
And if you look at the schools and you look at what's coming out of the pipeline, you look at the age, I'm not telling you things that other people haven't told you of what the current, 50% of the, I don't know, or 70% of the miners in England are like, 65 or older. I don't know, something like that, whatever it is, right? It's scary.
Yeah.
Right? It's scary. No question about that. On the other hand, if you recognize the fact that if you were to move to a new kind of operating platform, one where decision-making is centralized.
Yep.
If you're able to move to an operating platform where your scanning and your examination is done by others procedurally, and if you're able to move to something where it's done by drones, or it's done real-time or characterization, or whatever that, suddenly you realize that the needs you have of this group aren't the same.
Yep.
And if you move even further down that path and you start looking at things like AI and machine learning and what it will do for you and so forth and so on, or what it can do. Let's talk about what it can do.
Yeah, exactly.
Then you realize that, do you even understand that? And that's the technical side.
Yeah.
A lot of what we're seeing with our clients as well right now is that, suddenly being technically good enough isn't good enough.
Yeah.
Do you understand the business side of mining? Do you understand why that choice you made to reinforce this was economically a poor one? Have you balanced it out with safety?
Yeah.
And more than that, now you have to make this decision. Look at the oil and gas companies, right?
Yeah.
The Schlumbergers, the Halliburtons, the Baker Hughes, what they took away from the old oil and gas companies and what jobs they did. In order for those companies to operate, they have to collaborate.
Yep.
So now, does today's geotech actually know how to collaborate with the people in strategic planning or the vendors who are and the answer is, well, on average, no. It's not what we taught you to do.
Yeah.
Right? You're a qualified person and you do whatever that number is with whatever that letter is, and then you sign it, kind of thing.
And then toss it over the fence to the next person.
Over the fence.
Yeah.
So, I mean, and you've said it already, right? And I've said it in a longer-winded way, which is fundamentally, if we look at what the future needs are, I'm not worried that we won't have enough geotechs.
Yeah.
I'm more worried that people don't want to work in mining companies.
Yeah, absolutely.
And it's not that they don't find mining interesting. Again,
Yeah.
a lot of people that want to work for us.
Yeah.
Have no shortage of talent. And again, we are a boutique, so we are by definition a little smaller.
Yeah.
But nonetheless, people find this work fascinating that we do. On the other hand, a lot of those folks work in mining companies today.
Yeah.
And they wouldn't want to work in mining.
Yeah.
And in miners.
Yeah.
And they may be doing that because they don't feel like it's a place that's flexible enough with ideas.
Yeah.
Or they have an issue with the diversity of it, right? Despite the push for diversity. There is diversity in terms of your percentage, and then there's diversity of acceptance.
Yeah.
And whether you feel like this is a place I want to be, as a nonlinear thinker, or as a woman, or as a person of color, whatever the case may be.
Exactly. Even neurodivergence as well. Diversity
Even
of
neurodivergence,
thought.
I mean, we can just go through the list.
Well, it's really interesting you talk about that because a couple of years ago I was talking with a senior executive mining company.
Mm-hmm.
They just hired a 20-something-year-old young woman to do some of the remote operations. Why? Why was she so good compared to the entrenched people? Gamers.
Yeah,
They're using console.
Yeah.
Like,
of course.
It's just
of course.
you're doing something that you love to do in a computer screen, but you're actually
Well, the NSA figured that out years ago.
well,
Right?
exactly.
Dude, yeah, so exactly right.
But it's. I wanted to come back. I lost my train of thought there. I wanted to come back. You talked about the DoD, and one of the examples I've used in the past, I think it's a really cool example of how you can get competitors to collaborate to solve a big problem.
Yeah, that's right.
Right, and it comes back to I think it's called the health system that DoD in the States put together, and they had TEAS and a bunch of other and a bunch of universities getting together to say we want to have a laser-based ship-mounted, truck-mounted system.
Sure.
We got a lot of problems to solve. How are we going to do it?
Yeah, and so I mean that's a core component of how they operate.
Yeah.
And they operate at the most senior level to do that. So, for example, I remember sitting down at Boeing headquarters in D.C. with the U.S. Navy, and we were talking about the challenge. And it was the time that I remember the secretary at that time was Hondo Gertz, great guy. And the challenge was we don't have enough. We don't have a large enough fleet. We have 100 ship deficit or something in the Navy, right? How do we overcome that fleet challenge? And the people that were in that room were actually the most diverse people in the world. Actually, I'd met them at NASA at a cross-industry innovation thing that used to come together and sort of talk about that. And so the folks that were there, they were from Tesla, they were from Salesforce, they were from all sorts of different areas to solve that. But what they also do, is they have things like AFWorks and SoftWorks, and these are challenges.
Yeah,
they're challenges, and small businesses and others are out. I get them in my mail all the time. I think they're based down out of Tampa still, or they were a few years ago. And this is, hey, we are looking for the war fighter.
Yeah.
We are looking, is what they call them. We are looking for the war fighter. We're looking for a solution that allows them to have an exoskeleton that will allow them to, resist a 3-day journey, in terms of muscle recovery and this and that. Or we're looking to, and this is an interesting one, because I ended up actually stealing this for the mining industry. We're looking to understand how do you look underground to understand if there are insurgents in caves under the ground, right? And this is very useful, by the way, when you're trying to characterize a tailings dam for voids, right? You want to understand where there are pockets of empty. It's where things like muon tomography and fun stuff sort of. Yeah, exactly. Right? But they'll publicly call those out. And they'll invite everyone in who has an interest in being a part of that search. And we see pockets of that in the mining industry, and then we see it disappear. Yeah, exactly. And then we see pockets of it, and then we disappear. I just saw something this morning from Vale Base Metals. Yeah. I think Suzanne Balima at Vale posted it. It's one of those innovation challenges where we're going out and we're bringing everybody everybody in to do this, and it's great, it's wonderful.
Yeah.
And then you recognize, right, that this has been done before.
Yeah.
The challenge will be stick with it.
Yeah.
Right? Stick with it because there are others that are doing it and doing it successfully.
Yeah. And 5 other mining companies have the same challenge. Potentially. That's a whole other story.
That's a different problem.
Yeah.
That's a different,
whole other story.
Different issue. That's more your side of the table, right?
Yeah. But it's funny what you talked about. What I loved what you just said, George, is the whole cross industry piece.
Yeah.
What I found, and maybe I'm wrong, and I think it's changed. I think it's starting to change, but I don't think it's accelerating. Is that in the mining industry, we don't look outside of ourselves that much. We tend to look inward. Like if you take a look, you mentioned AI, for example, AI, cybersecurity. There's a lot of technology. Like this stuff is not new. Like it is decades old. It's been used in other industries.
Right. Some of the fundamentals of it, sure.
Some and even the application. So I'll give you an example. So Jeff Hinton, he's recognized as I had a long conversation with Jeff in 1996.
Yeah.
When he had actually, the reason I called him up was he was on the cover of, I think it was Canadian Business Week or Business Week. Yeah. They had just developed a system to predict breakouts in steel mills, right? Because if the breakouts happen, the steel mill closed down, it's a couple $1 million a day. And the steel mill it works great. It was 99.9% effective. We're not going to implement it. That's 20 years ago.
Yeah.
We're talking about the same thing today. Yeah. Every time I bring his name up or others' names up in cybersecurity, the mining industry's never heard of these people.
Yeah. No, and yeah, that's a fair point.
Your thoughts about reaching out to other industries and what other people have already done. So we're not reinventing wheels, and we can adopt and integrate. Because you can't just sit there and go, I'm going to take this and apply it. You've got to say, how can we potentially apply this, adopt it, and modify it?
Yeah, I mean, so you're right. Yes, in your thinking about how to apply that, I agree with you on that one. I think that the mining industry has always looked to other industries. Yeah, has looked to other industries, but never really taken advantage of going broad. Yeah. And for example, I mean, it's always popular. Ooh, what's oil and gas doing? Yeah, yeah. Right, that's and you laugh, right? But that was kind of their view of looking to another industry. But they didn't necessarily ask, well, what is the logging industry doing? Yeah. Or what is Google up to became popular during that surge about 7-8 years ago. Well, we want to know what Silicon Valley's doing. Yeah. We want venture studios and everything. But for the most part, we don't look beyond. And even if we do, we don't adapt it in. Where it does happen is it happens, again, just again, speak of Stratalis, it happens in companies like ours, potentially companies like yours, companies like the venture funds, right? Where we are, in fact, challenged to go out and help them define the problem and then scout in other industries. Exactly. And then bring it back. But once you bring it back, do they have the appetite to invest in something that is a technology readiness level below prototype? Yeah. Right? Yeah. Or do they have a desire to take something and convert it into something that's specific to the mining companies? And I think from a technology strategy point of view, that's where the appetite has not been consistent. Yeah. I think what's also not consistent is that we're here at PDAC or CIM or SME or IMARC or whatever those are. But when was the last time you went to the automotive conference in Detroit? Yeah. And I have to go as I'm interested in what they're doing. When was the last time that the head of technology or one of the folks that works for them decided to go to the Manufacturing Conference of America to figure out what's going on over there? We're building a factory mine, right? So go to people that run factories. But it's not a natural thing to do. I know. It's human nature, right? We stick at mining conferences. Yeah. Even the people in strategic planning go to PDAC and then go to the strategic planning stream. Yeah, exactly. But they don't go to the strategic planning conference or the strategy conference where you meet people from other things. And that's where I've learned the most. Yeah. I mean, I go to these things and I'm listening to people from the banking industry, where we do some work as well, right? It's one of the few areas that are non-industrial, right? Yeah. The banking industry, to understand how are they dealing with AI and data and cybersecurity. Yeah. well, I mean, this is the place to go because before they hit the
my
mines, they'll hit
God,
the
yeah.
banks.
Absolutely, and also the challenges are virtually identical. Cybersecurity, how are you going to prevent against attack, DDoS or whatever it is, all those sorts of things, and it's going to be because of the potential losses with banks.
Yeah.
Like they're going to be on this like a dirty shirt and try and solve this really fast.
They are, and I actually think that what's funny, right? The more I sort of chew on this with you, is that. Remember, I was talking about mental models and us being in our box, right?
Yep.
So, you know, I'll be at PDAC. I'll go to CIM in Vancouver. These are really great events, right? And then I was fortunate enough to give the keynote at SME.
Yeah.
I go to SME and I meet none of the people that I meet here. And Canadian mining, for the most part, sticks in the Canadian mining conference area. It would be really great to see you guys down in Denver and Salt Lake, and to see some of the people from Salt Lake up in Toronto, and even to see the people from Vancouver show up in Toronto. You know what I'm trying to say? There is a
100%.
pollination that doesn't happen even within a 4-hour flight of each other or a 5-hour flight of
At
each
the
other.
level it needs to.
At the level it needs to.
Right?
Yeah, sure.
And I agree 100%. So like we did a session at IMARC this year.
Yeah, right.
And
we were all the other side of the world.
Well, exactly. And it was amazing. It was one of the best sessions ever at IMARC.
Yeah.
Like it was put together properly, et cetera. I actually avoid Canadian conferences. I come to the conferences to network.
Oh, I like them.
Because the content, right?
Oh, okay.
The content's just, we're looking for different stuff.
But fair enough. If you're looking for the novelty,
the innovative.
Sure.
So what we're actually focused on is outside of the industry. So last year went to Collision, right? Went to Collision. We're going again this year. We're doing a I don't want to call it a workshop, a half-day event to get these things together. Yeah. There's a conference here in Toronto as well, Elevate, right?
Okay, I've heard of that.
Yeah. Which is like Collision, but the Canadian version, right? We're doing all these sorts of things. But back to, and it ties into getting ideas from other industries, right? Yeah. So there's a couple of things we find. We've actually found, if you talk to a mining company 5 years ago about startup technology at low TRL, it's like, go away, we want to buy it from an OEM, right? Yeah, right. It's got to be proven, we're not going to touch it. But now we're seeing a lot of these companies are investing in the lower level because they'd see it's a real serious problem we want to try and solve. Yeah. We want to try and move this quickly. It may not work. We may sink the cash and not get away with it. It's a couple $1 million versus solving $1 billion problem. It's worth the risk. So we're seeing that just taking right off. It's amazing.
Yeah, it's not across the board, but you are seeing it. And again,
in that handful of 6 to 7 companies.
Yeah, exactly right. And I mean, but again, it's not atypical that companies pivot and they change strategy, right? Often driven by a change in the excuse me. Often driven by a change in the CEO or the CTO or whatever the case may be. But I think in other industries, what you do see a lot of is you'll see a consistency in the application. Yeah. And so you talk about those 5 or 6 or 7 companies, I don't think it's a given that you're going to get them next year. Yeah. Right. And you know that. Whereas when you're a pharmaceutical company, your pipeline is your life. So you always know. If you're in the chemicals industry, your pipeline is your life. If you're defense, your automotive, your pipeline is your life. And I don't think that the mining companies have had as much success in technology development. Agreed. And so kind of like marketing and HR and other industries, when things get tough, they're often the things that get cut. And so we're now at a point, and we're all seeing it, where technology is getting to be inseparable from success. Yeah. But fundamentally, they'd still like the OEMs to do it. And I think part of the reason, and that's one of the things that's most challenging from a technological perspective, is your capability isn't managing a portfolio, an R&D portfolio. Yeah. Therefore, when you have 100 different things, it's overwhelming. Yeah, absolutely. It's on the side of your desk that you don't have time for. It's overwhelming. It's just how are you going to do it? You know, you're testing a bolter, or you're testing, if you're lucky, you're testing an electric haul truck, or maybe you're testing black mass recycling. Yeah. Okay, but you at the same time, then there's 40 other things, from ore sorting to predictive analytics to, I don't know, exoskeleton. Yeah. And who's going to manage it for you? Yeah,
It comes back to the design of the company,
yeah.
the resources they have, and the assignment of the resources and what they're doing.
And to your point, build by partner strategy.
Exactly.
What are you going to buy? What are you going to build?
Yeah.
And then to your point, should you be partnering a whole heck of a lot on things that are non-competitively disadvantageous?
Absolutely.
I.e., if somebody else gets it at the same time of you, so what?
And that comes back to, again, what you compete on, and the value you get is not going to be my competitor and I, or two or three of us, we're all competitors. We develop technology. The value is not going to be in who buys it first.
Yeah.
It's typically how it's deployed. That's where
how good you are at implementing it.
That's the
right.
value.
Yeah.
And every company is going to get different value depending on
whether they suck or not at doing it.
Exactly. They know what they're doing.
How big of an issue it is for them.
Yeah.
Right? How big of an issue? I mean, so, I think one of the fundamental interesting things to watch, and to really watch as it plays out, because I think it's still playing out.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right? Is things like Race 21 at Tech.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay. Tech went in very deep, at least from an outside-in sort of perspective, right? Went in very deep on investing in digital solutions.
Yep.
And in building that capability. And they appear to have reaped benefits from doing so. And now the question becomes, over time, how well implemented are they? Yeah. How well integrated are they? And do you shed them? Do you shed the capability because you don't need it anymore?
Exactly.
And do you downsize it? I got $10 that says the answer is yeah. You shed and downsize the capability because now you've achieved some of those goals. But if you were good at building it and then good at deploying it, hopefully you haven't lost something in the knowledge of how you did that, because it's unique.
Exactly.
Because it's unique. Maybe it's not the digital thing anymore. Maybe it's something else, right?
Yeah.
Maybe now you're moving to machines or learning underground mining, but it's that capability. That's something. Don't lose that competitive advantage, because it is an advantage from a people point of view and a process point of view.
But it's also what you just said, George, what's critical is the value. And I had this similar conversation, except it was related to intellectual property.
Okay.
And a lot of people do not understand you can use your intellectual property to create value in different ways, which is kind of what you just said.
Yeah, no, but IP's an interesting sword. Again, this is one of the interesting challenges, right? When you work with all these big companies, right? You there's only so much you can say, but years ago, well, this is no secret to anyone, right? Years ago, Rio Tinto was very protective of IP and their technology development.
Yep. They admit that to us.
There's no secret, okay? And let's face it, when we talk about mine of the future, in many ways, it's that term, mine of the future.
Yeah.
It's Rio that really kind of, I mean, at least to my mind, maybe you have a different.
No, they started it.
Yeah. It's Rio that sort of made that name.
Yeah.
A thing. In fact, I think they trademarked it or something like that, right? But from an IP point of view and a protectionist point of view and wanting to own what came out of it, I think that hindered their ability to develop. I have another client who doesn't have an IP manager.
Yep.
They don't have an IP strategy.
Yep.
These folks own a lot of very, very cool processing IP.
Yeah.
And they don't even consider, how do you monetize that? How do you take advantage of that? So I think IP is one of those hidden off in the corner sort of things that, I'm sure, you have an IP lawyer on or something like that, or an IP genius on, and they'll tell you this is a hidden asset or something.
Yeah, yeah.
I'll be honest, I don't even think about IP that much. Yeah. And I probably should,
well,
but I don't.
We just run into it because we find and we're diverging a little bit, but we find there's a disconnect between startup and technology companies, mining companies, with respect to IP.
And academia.
And government. Yeah, there's a big misunderstanding. Well, the biggest thing that we see, and I hear this from the mining companies all the time, is that people are bundling IP the asset, IP the right, IPR, and commercial rights into the same conversation as the same thing.
Yeah.
They're not the same thing. Right?
Well, and
there's a vast difference. And I was at an event, actually it was in New Jersey, and you're in the neck of the woods, last fall, and there was 3 startups there. The mining company's going to steal our IP. There's 5 mining companies. We don't care about your IP. We don't. That's not. We want rights to it for internal purposes. We want to help you get it commercialized because the value
we want
for
to
us,
use it.
We
Yeah,
want,
we don't just-
we don't want to use the IP. We want to use it when it's commercialized.
Yeah, exactly
And if,
right,
and if
yeah.
you die, but there's that massive misunderstanding, and governments in academia. I worked in academia for a while. There's a misunderstanding about the value.
There's a
it's huge.
The understanding makes sense.
Yeah.
Because if you work in Silicon Valley, if you work in the venture space, right, whether it's biotech or whatever it is, IP is your gold.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right? I mean, that's what you've got. So you're super protective of it. I mean, and academia as well, right? In the research space, not just academia, but the research space. And that's why you need, platforms.
Yeah, exactly.
That think through this thing. I mean, CIMIC is one such platform. And to speak about one that, I do a lot of work with, University of Toronto as a mining futures. They have the partnership platform, for example.
Yeah.
One of those very public is the one they have with Valet.
Yeah.
Right? Yeah. And what is that, right? That is a platform as well that deals with the issues of IP in advance for research, right?
Absolutely.
And so therefore, when you're able to go in, it takes away the scary stuff. But, it probably took a year to put it together.
Yeah.
Right? And CIMIC probably has a very similar sort of thing, or it does maybe on a bespoke level to deal with the IP issue. If you're building a mechanical cutting...
It takes anywhere from 4 weeks to a year.
Yeah, sure.
We've got it done in as little as a couple of weeks.
Yeah, I'm sure you have, but it had to be dealt with, right? You can't bring a Komatsu and an Agnico and a Valet and a Newcrest or a Newmont or whoever together in that room and not deal with the issues of, well, if we do this, do we get to keep?
Well, the funny thing, though, what we find is when we're working with, whether it's an OEM, a startup, or an SME, the IP challenges are not with the mining companies.
They're with the OEM.
They're with the suppliers. Always. The mining companies
that's their core.
Yeah. But there's a misunderstanding about what the mining companies actually want.
Well, yeah, okay, fine,
anyway.
but that's understandable.
Yeah,
I mean, that's their
bread and butter.
Core. And look, every it's the same thing on the consulting side.
Yeah.
So so it's the same thing on the consulting side, right? Let's take a second here. You hire a consultancy who shall not be named.
Which one?
But who you know. But look, you hire them to come in and you do your benchmarking for you, or to analyze your operation, right, and your performance of different steps.
Yeah.
They're going to want to take that information and put it into their database, so that when the next person hires them, they say, "Oh, we have the benchmark of every other mining company. You IP."
Yeah.
Right? And now that's their IP, and they charge you a lot of money for it.
Yes,
right? When we build technology roadmaps for mining companies, right? The data is theirs.
Yeah.
But how we go ahead and build our radars and value things,
you're converting data into value. Data is useless without the value.
So, fundamentally, the companies don't care because they can't replicate what we do on their own. They just want the answer to help them make better decisions.
But it also takes them away from their purpose as a mining company.
Right. Well, what is the thing you want to focus on?
Well, exactly. But it's funny. Something I've noticed is because we kind of diverged into intellectual property and IP, and it is a lifeblood and a conversation I have routinely with people, and I'm a little surprised that we don't see this more often. Tesla's done this. Is open source. This industry doesn't use open source. I brought up several times. There's a whole open source consortium in automation in the automotive industry in Europe that all the major manufacturers, yet our companies aren't even there.
Well, correct me if I'm wrong, which I perhaps I am, but when it comes to technology development, I see what you mean, but there are things like GMG and stuff like that, right? Open standards and
I'm thinking about the actual technology.
Right? Oh,
in company.
this is how we
like AI, for example. There's all sorts of open source platforms in AI. There's all sorts of open source platforms for automation.
Yeah.
There's all sorts of open source platforms for virtually everything, cybersecurity.
Well, it's an interesting point. I guess you're right.
And every other industry's embraced it, but us.
But then you're suggesting like Vale would give away their flotation process, or
possibly. Well, look what Tesla did with their battery technology. So we can't take it any further. We're going to open source it. You can open source the software. Open source software is the typical platform, but
No,
a
you're
lot
right.
of people are open
You're-
sourcing hardware as well.
You're right. And we see it in the decarb stuff.
Yes.
Right, we see it in the decarb stuff a lot, right? Because this is the place, right, where we're as I said, just finished one of these, right? We're looking at novel technologies with regards to batteries, or issues with tires, or issues with driver fatigue and fleet modeling, and all this sort of stuff. And you're right. No, there is no actual open sourcing. I guess a bunch of that has to do with the fact that a lot of it is OEM driven.
There you go.
Right? Yeah. It's OEM driven, right? You're not actually building the battery yourself or that truck. You're using First something, whatever that company is that was doing that over at Anglo American, or whatever the
First Mode out of New York.
Yeah, that's it. Right, exactly. So I mean, whatever the case may be, right? So it's an interesting thought. However, what I saw yesterday was great. I was sitting with the head of base metals for one of the big mining companies, and they were talking about their strategy and what they were doing. And he said, and what we're doing right now, among other things, is we are, also focusing on getting our processes right and restructuring around that. And I said, that's great. Let me show you something. So he flips open his phone, and he shows me in real time everything from like the face through the processing down to like shipping. In real time, it's showing me, so this one went down this morning.
Oh, wow.
And this is what it did.
Across the whole business.
It was freaking amazing.
Wow. I've never heard of that.
Exactly. And I said, and I said to him, you're way ahead of the curve on this. And he flipped his phone. I could see the numbers changing. It was super cool. And he said, and this platform is X. He's like Pi or something like that, whatever it was.
Pi. I know what it is.
I don't, because it's not my area of expertise, right? Well, they didn't build that from. They built the layer. They connected the sensors. I said, who did you use for this? Thinking, well, I kind of want to know. He said, no, we did it ourselves. Like,
wow.
Right. So there is
started
open
with
sourcing, right? There is a use of other people's stuff, but it's pockets, right? This same company, right, couldn't tell you what's happening on tailings dam X over there. But
they can do that.
And that's what you want to see. Honestly, that's the start.
Absolutely.
But it's years ahead of a company, frankly, larger than them.
Well, if you think about that too, George, and this all comes down to data and AI and dashboards and IROCs and all that sort of stuff, is the data on his phone that you just mentioned. He can see, or she could see, or whoever could see what the company's doing, right? Yeah. It's got to be a data that as human beings we can actually understand and absorb instantaneously.
Yeah, that's right.
Right?
That's right.
Because there's a lot, if you take a look at Microsoft in the old days, right? They used to, all the computer engineers design all the interfaces. You go, what the hell? Like as human beings, we don't get it, right? There's a disconnect between using cognitive science and psychology, but it's getting, the point is the data you have to be able to look at it and make decisions. Yeah, that's right. Business decisions quickly. And can't be confusing.
And this is one of the things that excites me the most about AI. Yeah. Okay. So you're right. Yes. Data, things have to be designed from the decision, right? The decision backwards.
What are you trying to do?
We have too much data, everybody knows, and we'll get even more. And a lot of people don't have a lot of data, but forget that.
I agree before you get going. 100% agree.
But one of the things that excites me the most about artificial intelligence, right, is it's almost not what it will enable us to do. Yeah. But what it will enable us not to do.
Agreed. Yeah.
Right? And I would very much, I can't wait to see the world where we don't have to do things that, frankly, we add very little value to. Agreed. I worry. I mean, I worry as any normal person would be, like, what does this actually mean for our particular use and our particular future? But I'm an optimist. I'm the opposite of Elon. Right? I'm the opposite of Elon. I'm an optimist. You have to recognize, and everybody recognizes. I remember I was talking to years ago. It must have been 10 years ago, 9 years ago. I was talking to Mark Cutifani. Yeah. When he was at Anglo American, and I talked to him, about, what do you do to help bridge
Yeah.
the gap in society when you automate, when you mechanize, when you transform. And he gave me this great quote, which I ended up using in a keynote at some point, about how you can repurpose the resources you have and this, and you can do this. But at the end of the day, there's still going to be a duty at some point that the mining company has to help bridge that valley of discomfort.
Yep.
And it's not a duty of necessarily you're able to give people another job.
Yeah.
And it's not a duty that you can necessarily repurpose that shaft and turn it into a golf course or something like that, or whatever. Sometimes it's just, so I think with AI and stuff like that, the day will come where, they're just going to pump all my articles and your articles and whatever the heck into a machine, and we don't have to do this podcast anymore.
Great one.
There's no value added, right? But I think what's interesting, right, is remember we were talking about talent at the beginning of this.
Yeah.
How many geotechs do you need?
Yeah.
Well, it depends. How many decisions do those geotechs now need to take today versus that they won't have to take in the future?
Yeah.
We just did this project, and we try to use, we go through, we have a massive investment in artificial intelligence and generative artificial intelligence. A lot of it is in the back of house.
Yep.
Using our data to kind of reprocess stuff that we have already in our knowledge center. But some of it is more fun.
Yeah.
So we just did this project where one of our people spent time on a design staff, combination of Midjourney and something else to visualize concepts that the client had in real time. So we have a designer that works for us.
Yeah.
And two of them, and they do these mind of the future sort of things. And those take weeks to do. And there's no replacing the specificity that they bring to the table, right?
Yeah.
But when I just need to build a quick little vision of, okay, so here, inspire the CEO, inspire the board, a few different things of where we're going, overnight.
Yeah. Done.
Overnight.
Yeah.
And it's scary.
Yeah.
It's scary how good it is. Now, don't ask ChatGPT anything that you need to rely on, because it gets it wrong.
Yeah.
It gets it wrong.
That's a whole other conversation.
It's a whole different conversation.
But what you said about AI a second ago is one of the promises is it can help us stop doing things. And that's the essence of strategy as well. A lot of people think strategy, this is what we need to do. People tend to not focus on what we need to stop doing.
Right.
So what you
strategy is choices. Yeah. Everyone forgets that's all it is. It's choices, right?
But you tied the two together in some respects.
Yeah. No, and spot on. And I love the way that you said that. That's right. And so many people think about, and the same thing happens in sort of their vision, right? So many people think about what it takes to achieve their future vision. Not enough people spend time thinking about the showstoppers. Yeah. What stops you from getting there? Yeah. And so I think, yes, you said you marry the two together, and you actually have something powerful, something interesting, something that's game changing for the industry.
And you also understand, again, we chatted a little bit about this in the past, is what is AI really? Yeah. Right? What is it really? And is it being, I don't want to say misrepresented. Are some organizations pushing out the bright, shiny object versus the actual strategy, and this is the opportunity, this is how you can do it? You mentioned a second ago, George, about data. Yeah. Frankly, we don't have enough. AI needs a lot of data.
Yeah, and data over time.
Yes.
And more than data over time, one of the things it needs to understand as well is it needs to understand what good looks like from that data. You can pump a lot of data. So I think, so first of all, people are going after the bright, shiny object.
Yeah. Agreed. Yeah.
I told you about that company that hired us that wanted to split its portfolio, right? And that was doing some stuff, right? And division and all that jazz. And it's a recent project, so they're still working through it, and they're talking at board level. But one of the things that was fascinating about the conversation was one of the feedbacks we had the next day, which is, it was an hour-long meeting or whatever the case was. 40% of the meeting, something like 40%, was sucked up by a conversation on artificial intelligence that was not a core part of the vision of the future. Yeah. And it was a conversation by the board, many of whom have absolutely no knowledge whatsoever of what it is. But we know it's important. People will be asking us, what is our AI strategy?
Yeah. Yep.
And here
It's an
is
investment piece versus anything else.
yeah. So and here's where your financial analysts, your investor analysts and your management consultants and your board members and all these people, they guide you, but don't let them take over your show.
Yeah.
We, the external world, will tell you that artificial intelligence is important.
Yeah.
And to get you to invest in it, to move it forward, to drive the needle. And it is.
Yeah.
It is important. It is game-changing important. This is a big one.
Yeah.
But again, bear in mind that the speed of technological development and the speed of technological application to your business is not necessarily the same as the speed of hype.
Yes.
And so
the Gartner hype cycle.
Yeah, the Gartner hype cycle. Exactly right. There you go, Gartner. You're welcome. And so one of the things that I think is important to bear in mind is that machine learning helps you look for patterns, helps you to optimize, helps you to predict. I love it. Great stuff. Even things that we've had for years, or at least talked about for years, like agent-based modeling, right? Which takes something and goes ahead and gives a single variable in a larger system freedom to move. And then it looks at the patterns in the chaos. Great stuff. Artificial intelligence really is intended in some ways to get you to a point where you are no longer understanding how the optimization was done. You are no longer making the decisions and understanding how the decision is done. You're creating new kinds of neural networks that are essentially, quote unquote, replacing much of what you do. And we are not in many ways at the point yet where that is having fundamental impacts.
Agreed.
I think in the industry. Having said that,
it's getting there, but it's slower.
It's getting there. It's going to take a hot minute, and you're going to have to ask ourselves, how does this apply to our business? I can't wait for you to be able to just send out a fleet of drones. And these drones work in swarms. So you don't have to worry about them anymore. And when something starts to go wrong, they're noticing some dust slip over here or something, they choose to go and examine it. And say, we see a slope instability issue. Or they're moving around, and in conjunction with tracking of your fleet, they notice that there's a potential wobbly tire over here or something. Whatever that is, they start to make decisions independent of potential future scenario problems. So that you as a human being can make a risk-adjusted decision. Do I or don't I want to address this now? And so things like predictive maintenance, wow, yay, fantastic. Things like focusing on very specific problems to reduce, again, the variability, more predictive operation, deal with the uncertainties before they become showstoppers. That's exciting stuff.
Well, it's really funny. A saying that somebody gave me a while ago is, and this relates to data in general, whether it's discrete or otherwise, is we don't know what we don't know.
That's right. These things are supposed to somehow figure out what we don't know, and we won't even understand how they know it. But
well, even that, looking at pattern recognition or anything like that is basically you're going to find things in that data set that either go against your assumptions or interactions between variables that you didn't know about because you're making assumptions because you've been trained classically as the example used as a geotech or whatever. It doesn't fit. We actually had a project like that, and the results that came out of that just blew people away. They were stunned. They were absolutely. It found things they didn't understand. It made no sense. It made perfect sense, but they never would have guessed. But the other thing, what you mentioned, this is really cool because it relates back to fuzzy logic, is the drones automatically finding things, right? And picking that out. So there was a really cool article. It was written by an entrepreneur in Calgary, and it was he would build these little robots. He build these little. He used to sell robot kits. This is 20 years ago. Right? My graduate degree was in pattern recognition.
Okay, cool.
I know a little bit. I know a little bit, not too much, but basically it was really interesting. These robots would by themselves optimize and move toward light to stay powered.
Oh,
they weren't programmed.
I
no
this
programming.
Experiment.
Zero. And the person that started Fuzzy Logic, Lofty Zad, I think his name was, he basically said that's an artifact of fuzzy logic, which is like, this is so cool. Like they're not programmed, but they're actually stimulated to preserve by going to light to stay powered.
I think
it was fascinating.
It is.
Can you apply that to what you just said?
You know, to optimize X. I think it's a great question.
Yeah.
I'm not sure. You know, one of the things that you're just talking about drones for a second and AI. One of the things that I think would have been fascinating is this: look at the war in the Ukraine.
Yeah.
Right. We've got these again. So let's be really frank. We're hucking a bunch of armaments and firepower at the Ukrainians, and they are still kind of sort of holding on in the face of a very well funded, very committed so far Russian Russian army. So technological advancements and novelty alone will not overcome a massive wave. But you look at drones, and this war has become a war in some ways of who has more drones. And you still need the people to come in afterwards, right? Yeah, there is a role for humans, right? When you blow everything up, you still have to go over there and you have to sit there and secure it.
Yeah.
Right? At least today.
Yeah.
Right? Because we don't have robots that just go there with turrets, right? Yeah. And give it a hot minute, right? But drones themselves fundamentally change the battlefield over there.
Absolutely.
So now you've got these huge, massive ships, right, in the sea, and they're being taken out by a canoe with a Logitech cam on it, and a bunch of TNT or something
from Amazon.
Well, one side has them from Amazon, and the other side has it from whatever the Iranian version of Amazon is, right? Yeah. Or the North Korean version of Amazon is. So that kind of technological thinking and potential, that's the sort of thing I think as well in the mining industry.
Yeah.
That we need to be considering. And you brought it up before, right? Which is large haul trucks, small haul trucks, crush it and turn it into a slurry. Whatever the case may be, are we thinking about these little disruptors and looking at it? A couple of people are.
Yeah.
But they're also, and I think this is an important point as well in the future, they're sitting here.
Yeah.
Even if their title has a C in it.
Yeah.
And over here are the people with the money.
Yeah.
And the ability to make that connection.
Yeah.
On why you should do this. It's not always something that they were brought up to be.
Exactly.
Or brought up to do.
Yeah.
And so one of the things with this capabilities project, for example, that we're working on, it's not just there are three pillars to it. One of them is technical.
Yeah.
One of them is business. One of them is cultural and soft skills.
Yeah.
First two, we've always been pretty solid at as an industry. Next two, there've been pockets, but they don't necessarily necessarily form the core. So that's kind of interesting.
It's really cool.
Yeah.
Well, it's interesting too what you just said about doing the connection between them. What we're seeing, and we've heard from a few using ESG as a moniker for now, because it's changing as well, right? It used to be just a checkbox. Now it's let's say we're green versus actually doing stuff. Yeah. But investors are starting to stand up and basically look at what companies are actually investing in deploying technology that is going to help them with their ESG goals. So that's tying decarbonization, ESG, all that sort of stuff to the investment cycle. It's like the downstream coming closer. The investors are now coming closer, and what are you actually doing?
But it's risky.
Well, it's really.
I've got to tell you a risky story in a second. Go ahead. Yeah.
No, just to finish this is that. It's similar to what you said before. There's kind of like I was talking to one of the investment folks, and it's like two bookends, right?
Yep.
Some companies, 100% ESG is critical. We've got a strategy. We're going to move on it. We're going to invest in it.
Yeah.
The other side, I don't want to see those three letters in anything that we do. It's a fad. It's going away. So there is a dichotomy within how mining companies actually operate and how they perceive the future and what's going on, even like the 2030 targets. Yeah. Thus, back to my comment about, the top 6 or 7 that think alike, philosophically the same, can weather the storm, and all trying to move to a better place.
Yeah. No, I mean, it's interesting. And maybe offline you'll tell me what you're thinking about who are these companies that say, no, that's a fad. Because
There's 6 of them.
I'm curious. It's but the interesting bit about the risk of that, right, is that, and this is an interesting thing is that occasionally your CEO and the technology will get ahead of the reality.
Yep.
So in a particular case over here, there is a company that is talking a lot about ammonia
Yeah.
and ammonia power.
Yep.
I think ammonia power is neat.
Yep.
It also can kill you.
Yeah.
Not handled properly. But apparently somebody, sort of sold this story to someone, and this person is now telling this story. It's just a drop comment.
Yeah.
Not a big comment. It's a drop comment, though, to the market. So someone out there is paying attention to, do they or don't they have ammonia-powered eggs?
Yeah.
And maybe they will one day, and maybe they won't.
Yeah.
Because it may or may not make sense. But it sure as heck isn't ready now.
Yeah.
Unless you're in the shipping industry.
Yep.
In which case, yes, knock yourself out. Absolutely. Ammonia power ships are a thing.
Yep.
We're going to do them. And so, you have to be really careful as well, with education, I think, around technology and transformation.
Oh God, yes.
Moving up. But again, I mean, these are the things.
Well,
that
it's
companies
funny you
gotta
say
figure
that.
out.
There's a years ago, we're in a 7 years ago, we're in a strategy session. We had the CEO of one of the mining companies in our board strategy session, and he got a text from the CEO who was at the BMO conference.
Yeah.
And basically, what are we doing in Technology Acts? I can't remember what it was.
I need some talking points.
I need
right
talking
now.
points
Yeah, that's right.
now
Yeah,
because
yeah.
but it's tying what the investors are looking for who don't know anything about it either to a technology strategy for or deployment and investment in these things. So
Yeah.
it can drag companies sideways.
It can. I mean, look, there are companies that do it well. There are a couple of the major miners, that we are the de facto builder of their technology roadmaps, for example. And what you recognize is, and you know who did a good job of messaging technology? Anglo-American.
Yeah.
Right, for a while, right? And they would talk about Future Smart.
Yep.
And they had a few big key things, some sort of advanced processing and dry waters or low water. It was a thing actually for a while. Low water tailings and the hydrogen truck.
Yeah.
And they had a couple of neat microwave preconditioning, I think. They
And
had
mechanical cutting with microwave pretreatment
exactly,
too.
right. Yeah, they had a couple of things. But understand, that was not the whole fleet
No.
of ideas.
Yeah.
That was the right level of idea for a CEO and an investor to have a story.
Yes.
And at some of these companies where we do the roadmaps, whether it's automation or tailings or this, or we do them all, you recognize that there is a whole other suite of short-term,
Yes.
procedural, small tech, not to, that is going on underneath it, so that you can give the CEO 6.
Yeah. It's
Right?
not all game changing.
It's not all game changing. I mean, it's not all game changing. I mean, you and I know a ton of technologies that basically are sitting underground right now that somebody was playing with, and then they just kind of hucked it off to the side and they work.
Yeah.
Or procedural stuff that barely qualifies as technology. Or heck, there is a bolt. It goes in the wall. No, you laugh.
I
but
don't
then
know. I laugh because I know what you're talking about.
there's a bolt that goes in the wall. You inject it with a resin or something. Is it a or it expands or it twists or whatever the case it is? Is it a technological advancement? Yeah, it is.
It's incremental.
It's incremental.
It's a small one.
But it's still
Absolutely.
it's still something. I actually think, in many ways, and the more I talk to you, the more I feel this, right, is that we have so much going on.
Yeah.
That we almost feel in some ways, and this is the danger, like the industry and companies are sometimes a little bit ADD.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
This is everything. There's so many things going on, and then no. We've spent too much time not focusing. Let's pivot.
Yeah.
And so consistency and understanding, again, as we've talked about, it's almost the message of the day.
Yeah.
What is your core?
Yeah.
What will your core be in the future? And then finding a way to reduce that uncertainty is going to be the key. And that, in some ways, I think, kind of brings us back to something we talked about at the beginning, which is in order to reduce the uncertainty so we can transform.
Yeah.
We think about the greatest challenge facing industry. I think we really have to not forget that while the greatest uncertainty is still our people, it's also our greatest asset.
Oh, absolutely.
And so getting us to speak not with one voice, but with many, many, many different little voices, kind of allows us to build a quilt made up of a lot of little threads that's going to protect our industry when things start to pivot. And I think if anything, that's the thing that individuals who have influence should be doing, getting other people to share why they're in mining.
Yeah.
And what my why is and why I do this every day. Because it's easy if you're in pharmaceuticals, right?
Yeah.
You heal the world, or nursing, or agriculture, you feed the world. In mining, it's been tougher. And so that I think is and me personally, that's what my time is spent mostly on, getting other people to be advocates for themselves. Because all this technology, all these things that we love, all this transformation, all this stuff that we love, all these whatever it is, can only happen if the world lets us.
Yes.
And so we have to remember there's a very human component to all of these robots.
Yeah.
And we can't ignore that.
Absolutely. George, I'm just going to say that was an amazing, it's a really good way to end this. Like, it was just the perfect synopsis of everything.
Yeah.
And it's been almost 2 hours now. So we could keep going. You want to keep going?
No,
But
it's been
I thought that was a beautiful way to end this. It's all about people.
Yeah.
Right. And no matter the technology, et cetera. So I was listening to you and going, oh my God, that's good. This is a good wrap up. So this is George, this is an excellent conversation. I still have half a page of stuff we could talk about. But again, we can maybe do a second run at this some other time.
This was a lot of fun.
Which would be really cool because there's other things we can do as well. So, George, again, thank you very much. This has been absolutely fabulous. This is one of the best conversations I've had in mining and transformation, all that sort of stuff, in a very long time. So it's been a huge pleasure. Thank you.
It's been a pleasure here as well. Thanks for having me.
Thank you for tuning in to Source. We hope you'll learn some valuable insights and really cool information about the mining industry and especially how it impacts our lives every single day. You want to stay tuned to what we're up to and the really cool innovations that are going on every single day? Connect with us on our social media channels, LinkedIn, Twitter, or at our website, rethinkmining.org. Until next time, catch you later.